Well, welcome injured and hopefully never injured runners to another episode of Mr. Rubio Used to Run, the Running Warehouse podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Rubio, and my co-host here, who you're not injured at the moment, correct?
Not currently.
Okay. Connor Blaylock is across the hall from me here. Yeah.
And we also have another guest today. And,
Yes.
you know, over the last year or two, we've had on a lot of fast athletes, but our guest today is the one who makes sure all those fast athletes show up on the starting line healthy. I think you unofficially labeled him as the doctor of the track stars. And I know just in this room right now, the IQ has probably gone up a few points.
Well, it wouldn't be too difficult with you and I in the room. Anybody who's smart come in here, raise it up significantly.
But anyways, we've got the one and only Amol Saxena. Amol, how are we doing today? Are you familiar with the podcast game?
Yeah. I listened to Joe on steep ravines recently. Sure.
Perfect.
Yes, I did that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting concept. But anyways, we usually start with either your background, because you were a runner. You still a runner.
Yeah, runner on a bike. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you started running when?
1972, watching the Munich Olympics.
Oof. It's a
3
great.
years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
Started. Yeah.
Did you age group track or anything like that? Or just
Yeah.
ran-
Did age group track, high school track, a little bit of college, and then on the roads while starting my practice and raising a family. And then the knees kind of went out, and so picked up the duathlon with a little bit of running involved, and then now pretty much just biking and running 10 miles a week.
Right. And you're coaching too.
Coaching too, been coaching for 50 years.
Wow.
And you said a little bit of college running. You ran at Davis for a little bit?
I ran with the team at Davis, but I competed for Washington University in St. Louis. I transferred there.
Yeah. And with Davis, of course, maybe a little bit of an Aggie background. Have you ran with the Aggies at all?
I joined the Aggies when I was in high school.
Oh, wow. Might be our youngest Aggie.
Yes.
Yeah, 1978.
Was it Tina?
Peanut. Yeah, Tina coached at our high school, but Peanut was, at Starting Line Sports, and rest in peace, Dirk Roloff and Angel Martinez and Jim Van Dyne. All those guys were back there 50 years.
Worked for Bob Anderson.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I worked for Bob Anderson too.
Wow.
So what's your official title? And in a couple sentences, what do you do?
I don't know if I have official title. Yeah, I'm a podiatrist. I specialize in sports medicine, particularly foot and ankle surgery in athletes. I've been doing it for 36 years. I was in private practice for 4 years, and joined the clinic for 32 years, and then now back in private practice with a group called Bass Medical, but have my own thing now in downtown Palo Alto. And
Yeah.
I'm still volunteering as a coach. I'm official USA official and a level 1 coach. And I've been coaching, as I said, for 50 years. I started running when I was 10 and no one knew about running. So when I joined this junior high school program, the coaches were wrestling and football coaches. So I was just reading every book I had and every book he could get, and track and field news, and spouting off workouts. And I coached a guy who won the state championships in the 100 and second in the 200, and a girl got third in the 800 when I was in 7th grade.
So when you started going down this medical route, did you always know you wanted to be working with runners?
Yeah, that's 100% why I did it. So I was fortunate in high school and junior high to be treated by 2 orthopedic surgeons in Palo Alto who were just really, really good people, and they just didn't like treating runners or operating on feet. So podiatrists at the time in the 80s were treating runners and operating on feet. So they encouraged me to become a podiatrist and join their group, and it worked out after 3 years to join their group. And I was doing a lot of volunteering with USA Track and Field and with the Stanford guys and gals and the ex-Stanford guys and gals. And then the Aggies had a huge presence in the Bay Area. So I think in 1992, I had 18 patients in the Olympic trials.
Wow.
In 1998, I had treated 6 of the 12 finalists in the 1500. And so if you bet on racehorses, it was kind of pretty good odds I would win. But yeah, so I've been involved with track and field, and my wife is the head coach at my alma mater with my high school coach, is like a father to me, Hal Daner. And my son picked it up, and my son's now the director of track and field at UC Santa Barbara. And my kids did track. My older daughter ran at Oxy and ran the steeple and ran in Australia when she was going to med school. And then our younger daughter's a professional dancer, but she high jumped. So everybody did track in some form. So
Yeah, and I mean, it's exciting to hear that like you took that route, because I know, Joe, a lot of your athletes, myself personally, we get injured over the years, and you go to the doctor, and a lot of these doctors don't have that running background. They say take a couple months off and check back in, and like it's cool to see someone who actually understands the running game and can help athletes kind of get through these injuries in a quick way.
Yeah, well, I tell people I'm the doctor. I'll tell you if you can't run. I'll tell you if you can run. And, technology's evolved, so now we've got things to help people keep running, like anti-gravity treadmills, and technology like Shockwave keeps people running. So, but yeah, it's really frustrating because even as a coach, we just had a kid on our team. He stubbed his toe, and he went to a primary care doctor. No slight against them, but they just say rest for 2 weeks, and like, well, it's, I think you can get on an anti-gravity treadmill. I think you can get on an elliptical and do something. So anyway, yeah, it's frustrating to patients and coaches, I'm sure.
You see a higher percentage of certain injuries with high school versus college versus post-collegiate? Or is it?
Yeah, for high school, we see more shin splints, which are really just an occupational hazard, not really an injury, because kids get them when they start practice and they haven't been running. So they immediately get told it's an overuse injury. But if they haven't been running, how's it overuse? And it's really just a growth phenomenon, and things like Shockwave and cushioned insoles, and you can keep kids running. But so in high school, that's probably the number one issue I see. And then as people get less young or more competitive, that's when you see more of the Achilles issues, and also if they are putting on more mild stress fractures. So
Would you say Achilles is one of the toughest injuries to, I guess, that you see commonly, the tough to treat, something that takes out a lot of careers?
Well, there's 3 reasons why people don't run anymore, and one's their Achilles, the other's their knees, and the other's their back. I don't think Achilles are that hard for me to treat. I publish my outcomes. That's another thing that I dedicated my career to, is publishing outcomes, because you go to meetings and people say, oh, this worked well in my hands, or this is a good procedure, but they don't publish their outcomes. And unless you publish in peer-reviewed research, people don't know if you really ran that sub 4-minute mile. You could have done it at Carmel High School, where the track is, how many meters short. And, or you say you dunk, but you're dunking at your home 9'9" basket. So I like to publish my outcomes, and I think that's given me a lot of credibility. I think the toughest thing about Achilles is that it's hard to predict when it will heal if you don't have surgery. If you do have surgery, at least if you use my techniques, it's pretty predictable.
And what's that look like?
Well, it depends what you have.
Yeah.
There's some people who just have Achilles surgery for their sheath, and they can get back running in like 3 weeks. And Pat Porter, I did both his Achilles, and rest in peace again. He got back running in 2 weeks. But there's others like Achilles insertional repair, like what Galen had, that normally takes about 5 to 7 months to get back running.
Wow.
And it takes a year to be 100% with any surgery, but for sure Achilles is one of the slowest ones.
And the Achilles, I've had some small injuries over the years with that. Nothing that was horrible, but you've got a couple of different types, right? There's like the Achilles that is like that slow kind of chronic wear, and then there's like an acute where it could be like a really like one moment that.
Yeah, so there's acute rupture. So those are easy to diagnose. They felt a pop, they can't go up on their toes, and they got a soft spot in their Achilles area. And those I operate on routinely. And then chronic Achilles, that's the problem, is that the longer you've had something chronically, kind of like this downward spiral, right? So I tell people, if you hit rock bottom to the point where you need surgery, you don't get the express elevator to the top floor suite. It takes a while to get back. But I think the hardest thing about Achilles, again, is just if someone has it, to predict how long it takes to get better, if it's like a soft tissue type of thing. And same thing with other things like plantar. Some people get plantar and it lasts 6 months, and some people it lasts even longer. So the soft tissue stuff, to me, are harder to give accurate, predictable timelines if they don't have surgery. If they if they tear their plantar, I publish that as well. They get it back on average about 2 months if they get in a boot and get off it in crutches. But bone is much more predictable. Fractures and stress fractures, you can give pretty accurate timelines. So
You have rehab type protocols on your website, correct?
yeah, and I have a return to running thing that a lot of coaches use it. And if people follow it, they don't get injured. If the third week they say, "Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm going to do some intervals or hill workout," and then that's when they kind of deviate out of the lane and get some problems. But yeah, I give a lot of talks to coaches and running groups, and the 10% rule isn't something to really follow because that makes no sense. If 10% of 1 mile is 1.1 mile. We usually try to work up the mileage by first getting to a point where you can run 15 to 20 minutes. So to do that, you typically have to be able to be on elliptical or hard stationary bike for 40 plus minutes. And I don't think it's worth trying to run less than 15, 20 minutes anyway. And then they ramp up from that about 5 to 10 minutes every other run. And the other thing also with anti-gravity treadmills that I've found, because I've been involved with the company almost 20 years, they don't help you if you're running at less than 70% body weight, because what's happening at less than 70% is that you're learning to run at a slower cadence and overstride. And so you want to try to mimic your cadence on the anti-gravity treadmill. And there've been a lot of anecdotal stuff where people get off the anti-gravity treadmill, like high school kids, for instance, are run on for 3 or 4 weeks. They'll run on it with the same cadence, and then they run outside a lot faster. And we had 2 kids PR at Crystal Springs within 5 to 6 weeks of their injury, after just training on the anti-gravity treadmill for 4 weeks and outside only 2 weeks, because their cadence has been increased on real world with real gravity. So if you can try to maintain your cadence at 70% or 80%, you'll automatically pick up like five strides per minute, and that makes a difference. 5 strides per minute is a second per minute that you pick up. So, and then if you second per minute, if you have 17-minute 5K, you got 17 seconds right there.
Yeah, I don't think people put enough credibility or enough of importance on their cadence.
No, that's the thing I tell coaches. First 2 things you do work on is improve the cadence and run quietly. So
I had that talk with these 2 guys at the track at Cuesta.
yeah,
It's like, I go, you guys need to start doing some drills. You need to start doing some cadence work, because you're just burrowing into the track.
yeah,
Like, you watched all these other guys do their strides and do everything, and you can't hear them,
Mhm.
and they pop off the track,
Mhm.
and you burrow into the track.
yeah. I call
It's
it.
just a slap, and a slow turnover.
Yeah, you need learn how to have pop, not plop, is what I call it.
And I'll take that. Yeah, let's do that. So, in terms of just the frequency you're seeing injuries, is it Achilles number 1, or is it stress related? And if it's stress related, where's that located?
Yeah, I mean, I see some. It's sort of like people come to me for Achilles, so that's really biased. But yeah, I see the most I see are Achilles. The second most probably plantar. The third most stress fracture type conditions. So.
And with athletes that are running, 80, 90, 100 plus mile weeks, they're putting their bodies through crazy things. And I'm sure over the years, some of these athletes have done some pretty wild things to their body. What are some of like the craziest injuries you've seen? Just off the top of my head, we had a teammate who actually went in, he was having some foot issues, running 120 plus miles weeks. And he said that he got an MRI and they actually could see that he had stress fractures at one point, and he ran through those stress fractures, and that wasn't even the cause of his issues. Is that something that you see too with like athletes kind of like pushing through their injuries? And
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, that's why I don't ever tell a runner, let pain be your guide.
yeah,
I think that's a real big cop-out on a lot of doctors. They say, let pain be your guide, because runners can run with broken bones. You should really take caution with MRIs, though, because MRIs give a lot of false positives and a lot of false negatives. In one year, I had 6 professional athletes have MRIs, and all 6 of them were told that they didn't have a stress fracture, so they kept doing their sport, whether it was running or basketball, and all 6 of them broke. MRIs are not the best way of diagnosing a stress fracture. I see a lot of navicular. That's another thing I specialize in. And an MRI for navicular stress fracture is only 70% accurate, and CT scans are 100% accurate. So I tell people I like getting A's, not C's. So, so if you think you have a bone stress injury, you really want to quantify it, particularly an in-season athlete or like a high school kid. A CT scan is the best thing.
Yeah. Okay. So that's like we hear navicular. I feel like more recently we've been hearing that term more. Is that something that you're seeing a little bit more? And is there potentially some sort of correlation with some of these new super shoes? I just feel like I didn't used to hear about
I've
navicular
never heard about that
fractures
before.
back in the day.
Yeah, so 25 years ago, I came up with a classification system for using a CT scan to base treatment on navicular injuries, navicular stress fractures, and it's actually now called the Saxena classifications. It was even on my daughter's orthopedic board exam. So if people don't use a CT scan to diagnose a navicular stress fracture, then they're not up on current research. And navicular injuries are catastrophic. They're career-ending. Basically, if they don't get treated properly, they either don't heal, re-break, cause arthritis, or they give up their sport. And none of those things are great. So if you're dealing with a potential navicular issue, which the navicular is the arch bone on top of your foot, it has bad blood supply. That's why it doesn't swell or bruise when it breaks. They totally misdiagnosed my navicular stress fracture when I was in podiatry school. You think someone would actually know something about it, but this was in 1986 when Michael Jordan was going through his navicular issue, and I did a great interval workout for me with the DePaul cross country team on grass with some orthotics that were pretty rigid, and rigid orthotics will limit your foot motion just like carbon plated shoes, which we'll get into in a sec. But if your foot can't bend in the area around your navicular will break. And if your navicular breaks, it doesn't have great blood supply, so it won't bruise and swell like other broken bones. And so it's a problem because then people keep running on it. And so you need to make sure, like a lot of coaches say, well, you got a lot of tendons on top of your foot and that's why it hurts. Well, you actually only have one muscle on top of your foot. It's usually not tendonitis if it gets worse as you run. If it hurts to go up on your toes, like a lot of athletes say, I can run 70 miles a week, but when I do speed work or getting spikes, it really, really hurts on top of my foot. That's probably a navicular or a midfoot injury. And so if you have rigid shoe gear and you're running on soft surfaces like I was running cross country on grass with a rigid orthotic, your foot has to give because the orthotic won't give. And just like the carbon plated shoes won't give. And the carbon plated shoes that a lot of kids are wearing, I know they want to run faster and their recovery is better, but they were designed to run on roads. And you're running cross country, and so that's a soft surface, whether it's dirt or grass. Mostly in California, it's dirt. So you have a yielding surface, and your plate in your shoe, if it doesn't yield or if your foot doesn't have the strength to move in that manner that the plate makes your foot move, something's got to give. And so the navicular bone tends to be the most vulnerable, and so that's why the navicular is getting more problems. And I think I repaired about 12 navicular fractures last year. I normally repair about 3 to 6, and just so you know, I hold probably the world record at repairing navicular stress fractures. So you're not talking huge numbers here, but the fact that I repaired 12 in 1 year is I think sort of almost an epidemic. I was joking. I had 3 from Massachusetts, so I had to declare a public health crisis in Massachusetts. I'm joking. But I mean, 3 from one state. I put like screws in like 4 people from Oregon in 1 year. So it's not a common injury, supposedly, but it's one of those injuries that doctors like to joke, well, you may have not seen it, but it has seen you. So I think now that carbon shoes are sort of mainstay and here to stay, people have to look out for that, and that area, the navicular area, is particularly vulnerable.
So is it less prevalent if someone's using a carbon plated shoe on a hard surface?
Yeah.
Okay. But if you use it on a soft surface, that's
when
your opinion would be a no.
Yeah.
So a super shoe, like a super spike.
I haven't seen navicular problems, maybe only 1 or 2 with super spikes.
Interesting. I wonder if that has to do with stack height, if that has any factor.
I don't know.
It might be more. They're just running more on their forefoot, and it's not levering all the way back.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I found, which was, I mean, it would make all sense in the world, is I went running a couple weeks ago on soft sand in a Neo Vista, Mizuno. So really bouncy, fun shoe on the asphalt. And as soon as I got on the soft surface, man, that was hard. And you go, okay, well, that makes sense because right, all the energy that's going into that midsole is dissipating into the soft surface. There's nothing to bounce back from.
Yeah, you got.
So you're like doubling the effort because it's pushing all this. Anyways, I thought maybe the same thing could happen like with a super spike for cross country. Like you have this foam and everything that's supposed to work in conjunction with a hard surface, which in California you can run on alpha flies and stuff like that.
Yeah, so California is the only state we can't run a spike. So maybe I'm not going to see that issue as much, but yeah, beware outside of California.
Yeah. Right.
The other thing that's interesting about at least the original carbon plated shoes is that they have a pre-bend to them. And I took x-rays of Galen Rupp's feet in the shoes, and you can tell when he first started using them, he was getting plantar issues. You can tell where your metatarsals line up. If it doesn't line up where that fulcrum is, then you get more tension on the plantar or on the bones. And so he's got, luckily, strong bones. So I think you have to keep in mind that the plates are sort of are mass produced. And if the plate angulation doesn't line up with how long your metatarsals are, like Galen or other people, then you will have undue stresses. So we've been having people use something called a blackboard, and there are variations of those to try to mobilize your feet, to try to build the strength in your feet. And one of the PTs who used to be with the Oregon Track Club and the Irish Olympic team, Dave Campbell, he says you need to earn the right to run in these shoes. And I think now that some of the companies are going into non-carbon plated shoes, and some of them are making grooves and splits in them, I think the next frontier, whichever company comes to it first, is going to be the self-tuning carbon or self-tuning plated shoe. You know, if you were able to, if they had a bunch of slots in them, like they did do some studies at UMass with that guy Hugenkamp, and they found if you made a bunch of slits in the plate, you didn't really lose too much of the energy return and the VO2 max benefit of the shoe. So I think that's where I would go if I was a shoe company. So self-tuning plated shoe.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't realize that there's different super shoe designs that work better for different feet and different cadence and a variety of different things. You know, it's like it's hard to explain to people that someone that's running a 4-minute mile, the amount of force they're putting into the ground is significantly different. For a 110-pound person running a 4-minute mile, that force in the ground is going to be significantly different than a 350-pound guy running a 25-minute mile.
Yeah. And that's like, some of the racing flats, are specifically designed for people who are forefoot strikers, not heel strikers. And you see these people running 5-hour marathons in super shoes, and they're just going all over the place, and it's really not giving them much benefit. So
it'd be interesting because, like, in a perfect world, having custom shoes, custom plates to your foot would be ideal. But now we've got all these different types of shoes, different plate shapes, different plate locations, different stack heights. trying to figure out like which shoe is best for your foot. That would be interesting to see if there was a way that you could kind of like line up the perfect shoe for your foot.
Yeah. Well, one thing, getting back to Achilles, that isn't great for your feet are zero drop shoes, particularly for the older runner that's trying to adapt, or the zero drop shoes have been also good for business for Achilles. So,
Yeah, is there ever a time, like, do you think young kids getting some exposure to zero drop?
yeah, I think, and I'm running barefoot. I mean, it keeps coming up controversially in podiatry space about a colleague of mine said, I encourage my patients to go barefoot and work on barefoot strengthening, and then these other, let's just say, old timers for just throwing them under the bus, but you should never go barefoot. All these foot problems happen from going barefoot. And I was like, well, I don't think the guy was talking about going barefoot if you had diabetes, didn't have good circulation, had plantar fasciitis going on. He's talking about strengthening the feet, and you look at cultures that grow up barefoot. Those are a lot of times the people who are winning the races these days, right? And so I think there is a lot to be said about trying to do barefoot strengthening and using the blackboard and doing barefoot strides. I mean, we have our kids on the high school team do, on days of long runs, we have them just do 4 short barefoot strides across the end zone and just try to build up their foot strength. And so, yeah, different height shoes and heel drop variations I think are good. A lot of people, when they go into racing flats from trainers that are, say, 10 millimeters plus or minus 2, to go to a 4 to 6 millimeter racing flat, if they're not used to doing that, then they get calf strains and stuff like that. So I think varying your height and walking around barefoot, those are all good training tools.
Well, the other thing with going barefoot is you have proprioceptors on the bottom of your feet, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're wearing anything over your foot
Mm-hmm.
and you're running, it's kind of like typing with gloves on.
Yeah.
You have those sensors, and they alter your form.
Yeah.
Probably for the better.
Yeah. I think that wearing major motion control shoes, the industry has definitely swung away, luckily. But again, you can't, going back to doctors, they'll, not everybody needs orthotics, not everybody needs a motion control shoe, but you'll have people that unfortunately will still believe that. So,
Well, you talked earlier about some of the benefits of Shockwave. I just came off about a year and a half ago, a really bad foot injury that had me out for almost a year. And I finally just caved and like, let's try the Shockwave. And it got me through and got me back running again. Tell us a little bit about Shockwave, what it is, what the benefits are, and like the different types of Shockwave.
yeah, I just made a YouTube video on that. So it's on my website under videos. So in America, there's 3 types of Shockwave when they talk about Shockwave. All 3 work similar but different. They increase the blood supply by producing some form of energy. The most common one is air pressure or radial pressure waves. So it sounds like a jackhammer. And that's when people say they have Shockwave, 90% of the people are talking about that technology. The second is ultrasonic, which is like lithotripsy for kidney stones. So it goes deeper and it hurts more. It's like a deep ache. And yeah, about 10% of the machines, or 15, 20% maybe now in the United States, are of that technology. So that's using ultrasound to create microtrauma to increase the blood supply. And then the third type is called EMTT, which is electromagnetic transduction, which is electrical field, and is 10 times stronger than a bone stimulator and about 10 times more expensive. But as far as buying the machine, not the treatments. And so that has had a lot of benefit in helping bone heal and also produce stem cells for tendons and speed up recovery. I mean, I've seen people heal fractures, high school kids heal fractures using 2 of the technologies in like 2 to 4 weeks.
Wow.
And then also people use it for recovery. So like Galen has a machine, and the Ingebrigtsens have a machine. So now on running people are buying a machine. It's like an arms race. So this is called EMTT, and so that's the newest form there's a fourth form that we hope comes to the United States, but not for running injuries. It's actually for the brain. It's improved in Europe for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and it's become a game changer. It's covered by insurance, so it's called TPS, and Harvard's doing a study. So soon there'll be four types in America, but for runners, they'd use those three. So
the EMTT for recovery, what's the protocol on that? Just after?
Yeah, if you run a hard workout, I mean, you can use it for a certain number of pulses. Typically, you can go up to 15,000 pulses a day, but it's like a wand. You can't have anything with Bluetooth, cell phone, credit card within 3 feet of it.
What would happen if you did?
It zaps it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a guy, so the guy had it on his back, and the guy says, you got rid of your wallet? Yeah. And then he went to pay and took out his wallet, and credit card was zapped. So it creates a strong electromagnetic field. And so I published a couple papers. We have one coming out that shows that bone healing's accelerated to 4 weeks for surgical procedures. So that's a game changer, and they have less pain on weight bearing. And then they got back to activity on average 2 months faster. Wow. And then I just published another paper using the ultrasonic shockwave after Achilles surgery, and they got back about a month and a half faster. So we use these technologies I use them to accelerate healing and enhance my outcomes, but they're also you can use the sound wave for prevention. You're actually not allowed to use any form of shockwave on racehorses on race day because it works so well at blocking pain. So the shockwave would be, it's not banned in running, and we found that you actually have about half an hour of muscle stimulation or activation and better recruitment after using the cheapest form, radial pressure wave. And so you could use it 15 minutes before a 5K and feel better and potentially run faster. A friend of mine, a physio in England, tested his age group basketball team, and they had significantly less muscle soreness using it after the game. So there's a lot of opportunities there, and a lot of colleges are buying it. I know I got I take care of some runners from BYU. Wake Forest got it. My son, when he was at West Point, got it. He got it when they're at McNeese, but he's battling the athletic department a little bit about getting it at Santa Barbara. But a lot of college teams have at least the radial pressure wave. They have a nice portable machine for like $11,000. I just donated one to Dartmouth for giving my scholarship money back to them for my MPH. So. But they're portable now. They're about $11,000, and so athletic departments should be able to afford them. And you can really help prevent injuries, because as soon as you start getting a niggle, which is what they call injuries in England, as soon as you start feeling something on your Achilles or your shin, you just zap it. And
does it work for pretty much everything? Like, can you just do a full leg?
Well, you could. Yeah, it would take a while. That's why that EMTT is a wand is probably better. But yeah, you could cheat muscles and stuff. Yeah, it works for musculoskeletal stuff.
Wow.
So. What other kind of protocols do you have for recovery or injury prevention? Are you doing that?
So my basic things are pain accompanied by swelling is never normal. So you should not be running. And then you should never be limping. And then we like to use the VAS score, visual analog score, for 0 to 10, 10 being you're screaming in pain. And I've had 24 broken or dislocated bones, and including a really bad back injury, which was probably 11 out of 10. But we don't like people to run if it's 4 or more out of 10. And so it's self-replicating. So you use it for the individual and just say, hey, here's a scale. You can put it on your phone or whatever and say, what number are you at today? And if they're at 4, then they shouldn't be running. And then I don't like people to do the terrible 2s where they change 2 things at a time, either the distance or the intensity, or, intensity being intervals or hill work. So don't change 2 things at one time. And the other thing is, you got to kind of go by your gut, or the coaches got to go by their gut. If they don't feel like they should, athletes should be doing it, then don't do it. it's really frustrating to me when sometimes coaches think, well, after the race they're going to be sore, or after this workout, the rest of the week, they're going to probably have to take time off. So let's just load a bunch of stuff on because they're going to be sore anyway, because that's a good way of tipping people over the edge. So, don't get greedy with, after a good workout, let's just try to pile on more stuff. So.
One other technique that I feel like we heard a lot, or maybe I felt like I heard 5-10 years ago, and it's becoming a little bit more the PRP. Is that something that is used?
Yeah, so PRP is something I use almost every week, but it actually is better for bone stuff, not soft tissue. Whenever they test against soft tissue, they're using a needle and injecting a volume of some fluid. And so that's why placebo-controlled studies compared to PRP or almost anything you inject are almost the same, because the placebo has a needle and it has some fluid. PRP is useful for certain things, again, more bone type of stuff, not really tendinopathy or plantar, but some people get desperate, and I think it's okay to try things, especially before surgery. I don't feel comfortable charging people a lot of money for things that don't have a lot of evidence behind it. And some people charge like $2,000 for PRP or more. I hear people travel around getting these $10,000 injections. I'm like, for what? There's no way. There's no way that there's evidence behind something like that, because I think people are, being a skeptic. They're charging that much because they don't have that many patients and they need to cover their overhead or whatever. And sometimes the hype gets ahead of the actual evidence. And I'm really big on evidence-based medicine. And unfortunately, only when I was doing my MPH, Master of Public Health, only 7% of U.S. doctors practice evidence-based medicine. And it's sad. In other countries where they have restricted health, like, public health, they require doctors to practice evidence-based medicine. Otherwise, it's not covered. And so that's why, in England and in Germany and other healthcare systems I'm familiar with, they don't cover certain things. But the interesting thing is Germany at least now covers Shockwave for the private insurances. So,
And a lot of what we're talking about right now is for recoveries when you have injuries. But for a lot of athletes, performance is the number one thing in mind. What are your thoughts on some of the crazy results we've been seeing recently? And, you hear things about bicarb, you hear all these new techniques that are allowing athletes to run faster. Is there a lot of scientific evidence behind some of those applications?
yeah, I think a lot of I think there is. I mean, one is obviously we talked about the shoes. The shoes are helping with the recovery, and also with faster performance with the benefits from the super shoes. I think people have embraced altitude training. I think people have embraced using the technologies like Shockwave for prevention. Actually, Henrik Ingebrigtsen last year at the Olympics told me, he says, he had a great quote. He says, I cannot imagine being an athlete in this time period without the availability of Shockwave. And then I think anti-gravity treadmills, help you get more mileage. I'm not a physiologist. The bicarb phenomenon has been around for a while, but I think some of it is psychological, and I can speculate that some of it is also masking other performance enhancing things that are happening. So that may or may not be legal.
Right.
So like I said, I'm not all I know is if you expand plasma volume, you can hide a lot more stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, because we keep talking about plasma. What does that have a role in athletes' performance? It sounds like it could maybe hide some things, but does it also have some performance benefits to?
Well, yeah. If you increase your plasma volume, you have more, basically blood cells available to carry oxygen, right? And there's also, high altitude training, like I said, has been embraced. But the other thing is humidity-based training also helps expand your plasma volume. It almost has the same effect as going to altitude.
Really?
So
Is that heat as well? Like if you're
heat and humidity.
heat and humidity.
And that's why some of the athletes that train a lot indoors, Galen was training a lot indoors, and also the Ingebrigtsens do a lot of their stuff indoors on treadmills, partly because of the weather in Norway. And so those people are able to get, if you're training at 70 degrees and 80% humidity, you're going to have the effect of training in humidity outside. So
Interesting. Could you stack those together? Like if you were in altitude and in heat and
you
humidity?
could. I mean, there are people who have, I have a high altitude setup at my home. I haven't used in a long time. I've got probably the best, most expensive gym per square foot in America with an anti-gravity treadmill, altitude, spin bike. So, but I don't.
And is it affecting your performance? Or
I haven't used the altitude thing in years. So, But you could. The other thing you talked about stacking, I think people talk about double threshold, and I think that people misunderstand what that means. As you said on the steep ravines, people have been doing double thresholds forever. Sometimes you do a interval workout on in the evening the night before, and then the next morning you do a tempo run, right? Or you do a tempo run in the morning and you do something with intervals in the afternoon. I don't think people understand that the Ingebrigtsens are not doing 2 threshold workouts in one day. Because I've been around them when they've done it. They do stuff like 2400s in the morning, and then 6 hours later they get on a treadmill, and then they like doing 1Ks or about 3 minutes of intervals, and then they literally jump off the treadmill, walk around for a minute, and then jump back on the treadmill. They keep the treadmill running, and so the 20 by quarters are sub 65 or closer to 60, and so it's not quite like the threshold. So, but can your body recover? It takes a long time to build up to that, and I think the high school kids are making a mistake, or their coaches are making a mistake, thinking that they can do it, because as high school kids are skeletally mature at different rates, and I didn't stop growing until I was 20. I ran junior year in high school. I ran a 5:11 mile, and sophomore year when I was transferring from Davis to Wash U, I ran wharf to wharf at 5:10 a mile. So 6 times longer.
I don't know. I have these athletes that just they can't believe that this high school sophomore went from 42. And I said, now I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm not at that level, but my junior year, my last meet, I ran a big PR in the 2 mile, I ran 9:26. 4 months later, a 2 mile at Los Gatos High School, I ran 9:06. Does it make any sense? A 20-second improvement on a pretty fast 2 mile in 4 months. You're just growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just at different rates of maturity.
Yeah, you mentioned Fernando Valderas, and I got my mile PR at Los Gatos kicking down, when I was that same year. So 3 years later, he kicked my butt by probably 2 minutes at Crystal Springs when I was a junior or senior, but then just growing.
Right.
So
yeah, things change.
Yeah,
exactly. So as far as footwear, just for people that are listening, is there any sort of like rotation of shoes that help prevent injuries, or is it just a matter of just being in fresh shoes, or is it best to have a rotation?
Yeah, I think, well, for high school kids, sometimes the money's a little bit of an issue with rotation, right? But so I just tell high school kids that are beginning running, start with just a neutral shoe, unless they've got really, like there's a couple kids on our team, you can tell they're pronating excessively. So then we tell them to get more supportive shoes, or maybe put some inserts in the shoes and start doing more strengthening stuff. As you get more experience in running, for sure, you should have rotation. You have tempo or speed work days and long run days for, different shoes. And supposedly the foams get to regenerate or decompress if you wait a day or two. There's been some decent research lately showing that actually is a factor. So I think as they get older, getting a rotation of different type of shoes, also different stack heights is helpful too.
Because we're seeing some pretty high stack heights these days. I mean, 40 is almost like
Mm.
medium now, which that used to be high.
Mm.
Some shoes getting close to 60 millimeters.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, yeah, so that will be better for me for people who sprain their ankle, because once they go over, they're going over. So yeah, I don't know if you need to be that high on your stack height.
So if somebody has, like, this happens not a lot, but have athletes that twist their ankle and they have swelling, but then the swelling doesn't really go away, is there anything that they can do to minimize that or
Well, yeah, obviously just basic stuff like ice, but if they're still having pain and coming by swelling, they should probably get an x-ray. High school kids, sometimes their growth plates are still open and their ankle sprain is actually a ankle fracture of their growth plate. The growth plates are softer than bone. So what would sprain an ankle in an adult would break an ankle in a kid around, basically 14 or less, but sometimes even 16. So if it's still hurting, and some people have extra bones, or sometimes they sprain their ankle, they pull off a piece of bone. There's some good ankle braces now. There's one really good one that goes over a shoe, so you can wear your shoe that you like, you can wear the insole you like, and it goes over a shoe. It's called a Taco brace, and actually Galen used that to recover. He's got a nice little testimony about that. So that's kind of become a game changer. So you can actually run in that brace. A lot of runners don't like to wear ankle braces in the shoes, so tape still works, so it's worthwhile taping. So
Cool. Awesome. What other kind of interesting studies? I mean, you're sending me stuff from these clinics you go to and talks. Name something just weird that you heard recently at one of these symposiums. I mean, you told me about the increased blood plasma volume from bicarb.
Yeah. Let's see I find it interesting that a lot of the shoe companies now are trying to prove I find it good, actually. They're trying to prove that their reason for developing their shoes or producing the shoes they are doing have some credible research. But now I think the biggest take-home thing on that is you have to be skeptical, because you could publish almost anything in anything now, and it's sometimes pay to publish, and so you have to be careful on what you read, because if they're paying to publish it, then you have to look at the authors if they're affiliated with the company. There's a German shoe company, I won't name it, but they published a study on 1,700 runners saying they were less injured. They use 4 types of shoes. One is a standard shoe, one is a support shoe, one is a carbon-plated shoe, and the fourth was their shoe, which was a U-shaped midsole. And they said that these shoes were randomized to these runners, but they weren't randomized. They were self-selected by the runners. So they were trying to come across as they had a random study that showed that actually, lo and behold, their shoe was the safest shoe for decreasing running injury. Their shoe may decrease running injury, but you have to be careful, because now it's easy to publish. You want to look at studies that are and peer reviewed. And I think, some of the companies have really good research backgrounds and really good research labs, and other ones are trying to fit into the marketplace and show that they have research. So
yeah, there was one brand that came out with a study that said that plates didn't work and didn't make you faster.
Yeah.
And you go, well, you don't have any plated shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
well, and I just think, like, all these brands, they can make the results of their tests say whatever they want, because it just seems like every brand says, oh, our foam is 15% more responsive. It's like, well, if every brand, it seems like you can kind of fudge the numbers.
You can. Yeah, there's, statistics, the famous quote about it. But, I've been involved in the running shoe industry basically since I started running, almost, because I in high school, I worked for Bob Anderson, and I actually was the coordinator of the shoe survey in the year the controversial red dots on a certain brand of shoes, and then pulling the Nike pulling their back page advertising. I heard Bob Anderson's version of it. I heard Jeff Johnson's version of it. I was in the thick of it with Peter Kavanaugh, big biomechanics guy at the time at Penn State. So, and then I've worked for different companies over the years, or consulted for different companies, and so it's just kind of interesting being peripherally and sometimes directly involved with it. What the companies want to do, and people say, like, who makes the best running shoes? And I think the best quote is from one of the guys who got me interested in sports medicine, saying, "We think every company could probably make a good running shoe." So it's all individual, and like Ben O'Nig, who's another big biomechanics guy out of Calgary, they found that a couple things really important is the best running shoe is the one that feels the most comfortable. So it's perceived comfort. And they also found that only about 17% of the people deviate enough that they would benefit from custom insert. So a lot of times it's just getting the proper shoe, and sometimes an over-the-counter insert that is sufficient for a lot of people. So
That's interesting, because I have spoken with several brands that did side-by-side tests of their 2 super shoes, or maybe even 3, 4 different prototypes, and the athletes were maybe testing just a little bit better on the treadmill in one, but they said, I feel more comfortable in this other shoe, and they would go with that other shoe. So sometimes it's not just a numbers game. Sometimes it is that feel you get from the shoe.
Yeah, and the treadmill, again, is, unless you're training on the treadmill all the time or a lot of the time, like Ingebrigtsen's, treadmill's probably not the best place to get the perceived comfort. I mean, some of the labs, they have long straightaways and different surfaces. I mean, Nike has like tartan and this and that. They've got all these different surfaces. They've got probably the most sophisticated biomechanics lab in the world. And so, I mean, I give them credit for that. They've invested heavily on testing shoes and performance and stuff. So,
Do you feel that the shoes now, like this current generation of shoes, are better than they were 20 years ago?
oh yeah, for sure.
Because we get people all the time saying, the 1975 Adidas Runner is the best shoe there ever was.
Yeah, I had that shoe.
That was the yellow with blue stripe with a mesh on the top.
Yeah,
As hard as a rock.
those are cool shoes. Yeah, they all come back. Yeah, I bought an Hal Daner. I first met him, and he had SL72, so I got him a pair of SL72s. Of course, he wears Hoka's. He's, like I said, like a father to me. So basically, anything I say, he actually, maybe not unlike his own sons, but he listens to me quite a bit. So, but I got him those SL72s. I said, I just had to get them for you. So,
But the foams and
yeah, I think it's foams. Yeah, I mean, the technology, and I think it'll keep getting better. But like I said, I think the next frontier is a self-tuning type of shoe.
Yeah.
So.
And final question from my is, do you feel that people do enough preventative maintenance on their body when they're running?
I think that a lot of high school kids, because they have coaches, will do that. But I don't think you should feel bad if you have an injury. I think it's just part of it. Everybody wants to run a little bit faster or farther or whatever. But I think prevention. The sad thing is that stretching has never been proven to prevent injury. There's been literally almost 1,000 studies looking at stretching, and none of them have shown they prevent. And people talk about stretching for Achilles, and I tell people, I said, if stretching worked on your Achilles, why would anyone ever need to see a doctor? You see everybody stretching. They're stretching on curbs. They're stretching at the street light when they're waiting to cross the street. And stretching doesn't really work, but strengthening is the kind of more the key. So.
So strengthening the lower leg and so forth is...
And also all the way up to the core.
Yeah. So that would be the key to success, or limiting the amount of...
Yeah, damage on the body, for sure, yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, that was, everything I was hoping for. It was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Amol.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool.
And you can't forget...
Yeah.
Before you leave, what do you got to do, Joe?
Well, you got comment, subscribe, What else you got to do?
And you got a light.
Oh, you got to like. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So you do all that, and Joe has promised some free shoes for people.
Let's
So
put a name up there.
yeah, so we'll you got to send us a direct message.
Right.
Show us that you put in the effort, and
We'll also put up Amol's. What's your website, Amol?
Just my name, one word, www.amolsaxena.com.
And we'll put that up on the website so people can
Perfect.
take a look at it.
yeah,
Because you do have a lot of cool stuff on there, just as far as rehab protocols, timelines, and so forth like that.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's really interesting, especially if you've been hurt.
yeah,
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Thanks.
yeah. Thanks.
All right.
Till next time.
Oh, yeah. Peace out.